Justin Trudeau gets caught up in his third ethics scandal, and China and the Philippines pass controversial new laws. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. The first story today hits home. We're talking about our beloved Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. He is accused of another ethics scandal, and this time it involves the We Charity Foundation. The Huffington Post writes that Justin Trudeau is facing an ethics probe over the government's We Charity contract. So, what does that mean? Essentially, Trudeau made a deal to give the We Charity $900 million of taxpayer money. It became controversial when people found out that this charity had close ties to the Trudeau family. It's almost like he gave them preferential treatment in awarding the contract. It also was revealed that this deal probably did not follow normal contracting processes, and that's going to be found out in the probe. So, let's add things up here. Close relations with the charity, improper procedures, a $900 million deal. Seems like a conflict of interest to me, and that's what the ethics commissioner thinks as well. So, what kind of close family ties are we talking about here? Well, his wife Sophie hosts the organization's podcast with the founder's wife. That's pretty high ranking, I would say. Trudeau's mother, Margaret, was interviewed twice on that podcast by Sophie, and Trudeau is considered a regular guest at the charity's events as well. So pretty close-knit. The whole family's there. It's a family affair. Given all of that, Trudeau still makes a decision to grant them $900 million. His wife is the co-host with the founder's wife. Trudeau's own mother drops by often on the show. Could Trudeau have made that decision because it became a personal matter to him? Did he abandon his duty of impartial judgment because his family is tied to the charity? That's what the ethics investigation will find out. Right now, the bottom line is it doesn't look good for him. You can't give taxpayer money to organizations like that just because you are friends with them. That's called corruption. Now, before we get back into the details of the story, I just want to remind everyone that this isn't Trudeau's first rodeo. He's the king of ethics scandals right now. Last year, he was found to have violated the Conflicts of Interest Act by pressuring the former Attorney General to go easy on SNC-Lavalin, a company that was beyond a doubt guilty of their charges, but Trudeau didn't want to see them go down, so he intervened. He pressured the Attorney General to ease up, to not go full forward with the case against them. That's pretty sketchy. Because, first of all, SNC comes from his home riding, and he says, oh, well, I'm just doing this to protect some jobs. I don't want to see the company not be able to bid on government contracts anymore. Well, I can see that point, but then it begs the question, what's more important? You maintaining relations with the company and making sure they don't have to fire anyone, or upholding the rule of law? What type of precedent are you trying to set as the Canadian Prime Minister? That the companies can get away with anything they want because they employ people, and you'll be there to interfere in the justice proceedings to get them out? It just isn't his place to be making that kind of call, and he was found to be in violation of this Conflict of Interest Act at that point in time. Then, even before that, he had another violation. In 2017, Trudeau was found to have violated the law when he accepted family vacations on Aga Khan's private island. At one point, the RCMP allegedly owed the island more than $56,000 of, you guessed it, taxpayer money. Now, the real issue here isn't that Trudeau went on vacation. He has that right. As a prime minister, the job is stressful. You have a family. You're still a human. But you can't have the government seemingly owing powerful people favors. You can't be accepting these offers to go to their private islands because they invited you. It seems like it could be possible there's an arrangement there where he lets you vacation on his island, and in return, you give him a break on a few laws or something like that. Who knows, he might pull that card. Hey, Trudeau, we're buddies now, right? You came to my island, you vacationed here, you racked up the tab, $56K. Maybe you can do me a favor here. Maybe you can award me a contract here. It's corruption. It's the same type of corruption, actually, that SNC was guilty of. And here we have Trudeau partaking in the same thing. There is a reason why that at many companies you cannot accept a glamorous gift from a client because it can cloud your judgment. It can create a conflict of interest. It might make you doubt your decisions a little bit because they have something over you. And here we have Trudeau indulging in that. And yes, he was found to be in violation. Now he's stepping up for his third attempt. Getting his third, what is it going to be, a strike? Is he going to be out now? I don't know. This here is repeated behavior though. And it's the real Trudeau. This is him. We knew this when we voted for him. During the election cycle though, he was very lucky that Andrew Scheer was somehow more sketchy than him. Andrew Scheer was unable to capitalize on a prime minister who is ripe with ethics violations. People still voted for him because Scheer wasn't good enough, unfortunately. I don't think either party was particularly amazing, but it's just crazy to me how we're having to make do with a prime minister who can't tell the difference between being ethical and unethical. I can't even differentiate between Trudeau's state of mind. Is he willfully unethical, or is he just a moron? Anybody with any sense would know that these previous charges would be too damaging to even take the risk. Why even go on that vacation? There isn't much gray area. There are blatant offenses here. If it was found out, you would be tried as guilty. Why would the Prime Minister risk his reputation for, as I said, a vacation, or to prop up a popular charity, or to try and save SNC-Lavalin? These things would be pretty minor if they were to be ignored. If SNC went down, okay, that would suck. You might anger some of the people there whose jobs are at risk, but ethically it does seem to be the right move. Not going on the vacation. Nobody would know about it if you turned it down. It would just be neutral for you. But you were found out. You took a major hit. Was it worth it? I don't think so. And on top of that, there are other ways to go about trying to achieve what he did. If he had a brain, he could have tried to explore other options to arrive at his ends here. To still get the charity some money. To still try and help out SNC. Perhaps he could have hosted a fundraiser for the charity. He knows a lot of rich people. He definitely could have got a lot of money for them. Maybe he could have taken a regular vacation. That's allowed. But instead, his actions just seem to be too knuckleheaded for an acting prime minister. If he was the diabolical villain that some outlets are painting him out to be, I expect he would be more cunning. I expect he would have thought things through a little bit more. If he was serious about creating these ethics violations for himself, maybe he'd be better at covering them up and not getting busted 3 times. He might just be a goofball. I really wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Now, at the same time, it's possible that he is aware of what he's doing and still he's willfully breaking these laws. That would be pretty disastrous, actually. I don't know if it's true, though. He does have a great cover that he's created for himself. He has the cloak of woke to mitigate some of the damage here. He's come forward as a very progressive guy. He has all of the right beliefs, supposedly. He's generally a good-looking fellow. He seems to be in good spirits all the time. And he's with the right party to pull it off. Imagine if it was a conservative candidate who was getting caught up in 3 ethics violations, they'd be hung by the media. There is a type of imbalance here. It's just the facts of the matter. And I'm not too sure how deep that runs, but it is true that Trudeau, if he was planning to do ethics violations, he has crafted the right character for him because it seems to be contrary to who he is. Even me, I'm making excuses for him. I'm saying, oh, he might just be a moron because it seems to me that the picture that's in front of us doesn't depict this diabolical ethical mastermind who is just pulling the strings behind the scenes and creating all these conflicts willingly. It seems to me more likely that he's just a good-hearted fool who doesn't know what he's doing. Maybe those claims about him being inexperienced are true, but even there I find it hard to believe. He's been the prime minister for quite some time now. He is in his 2nd term, but still he hasn't figured things out. It doesn't add up. I'm not too sure where the chips are falling here. Is it really him plotting? Is it him being silly? Is it a mix of both? That might be a mystery that we don't fully flesh out until after he's out of office. But anyways, back to the article now. So, the Conflicts of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is going to investigate the matter. The We charity, who got the money, has also ended the partnership after all the backlash and they've given it back. The law is pretty clear in this regard. Public officials cannot make decisions in ways that provide an opportunity to further their private interest or those of their relatives or friends. It seems like it would be in his wife's private interest to advance the charity that she spends a lot of time supporting, one that Trudeau is also an active member of. Come on now, Trudeau? Why would you do that? Think of the optics here as well. We are seriously indebted after all of the COVID expenses, and here you are getting caught up in an ethics violation for $900 million. Oh, and of course, the spending is fine. We do need to find ways because it really is about giving young people opportunities. But the optics of you getting caught up in an ethics violation over the money, that's a problem because people are seeing the balance sheet. They know we are tremendously in debt, and it seems like you're here playing around with our money, not spending it as wisely as you could. Instead, you're getting caught up in a conflict of interest. Once again, Trudeau, why would you do that? Now, he came forward to try and answer it. He gave the worst possible quote you can imagine. Seriously, give it a listen. Here it is.
Obviously, the way this situation has unfolded has been unfortunate. We will continue to work hard to make sure that young people get the opportunities to serve their country, but it will no longer be with the organization we.
Amazing stuff there. I just love that first part. The way the situation unfolded is unfortunate. Yes, it's unfortunate. Unfortunate that you got caught and will likely get hit with your third ethics violation. Then he tries to say, think of the children. We want young people to have opportunities, but now it won't be that way with we. It's a classic move right there, trying to shift the blame around. It isn't his fault for making shady contributions with public money. No, it's the evil watchdogs who are questioning his decision. They're taking away opportunities from young people. Can you be more disingenuous than that? It's a weak response meant to dodge the question and avert blame. This is one reason why I don't particularly like politicians. It's all smoke and mirrors. Trudeau is up here sounding like a clown, to be honest. The dislikes on the video echo the same sentiment. It's like 80% dislikes. It's just not a sufficient response, my friend. Come on, Trudeau. All I can do is shake my head. If the We Foundation needed these funds, and they were the best place to receive them, there are proper channels to go through. Also, there are plenty of charities out here. Trudeau isn't even explaining properly why it had to be we. If you are giving $900 million to an organization that your family has ties with, you better have a good reason. He seemingly didn't even get that far into his thought process. All he could offer up when asked about it was that we was the only group that could administer his new grant program. The Public Service Alliance of Canada came out and said, no. They said that that was factually wrong and insulting, and I tend to believe that. To have we as the only charity in Canada that could use this money to give young people opportunities because that's what it's really about, I doubt that's truly the case here. We do have a lot of organizations. Giving one of them $900 million versus splitting it up among multiple groups is questionable as well. There is just a lot of things that are going unanswered here. The investigation will give us the findings to clear these things up a little bit, but at the end of the day, Trudeau is a fool for even getting himself into another scandal. You don't need 3 of them. This man really is the epitome of derp. He has been growing on me with his COVID initiatives. He had it under control, and now he comes out right after with this. He can't stay clean. This behavior is the type of stuff we would expect from the likes of a Saudi Arabian official. Taking bribes to private islands and trying to defend companies from government prosecution. Not in Canada. Having your leader so implicated in all of these accusations, it's just not right. It's something that Trudeau really has to work on as he moves forward throughout his term. He still has some years to go before the next election, and I do hope he can turn it around. Now for our next segment, let's move on to China. I've been exploring the depths of China's malevolence ad nauseum. You can look to past episodes to hear my rants, but this week they've done something new. Something even more crazy than the things they've done before. China launched a new security law in Hong Kong that can impose life imprisonment for conduct seen as threatening. Threatening to the government. Now what does that mean? Are they saying if you carry guns and threaten to kill a soldier or a police officer? Are they saying that if somebody comes forward and talks about violently murdering people on the street who are affiliated with the government, they'll be locked up? No. China is using the word threaten here very loosely. They say it's a measure to protect Hong Kong and China from threats of secession, subversion, terrorism, and foreign influence. Well, we all know that this translates to anybody who opposes the Chinese government is going to jail for life. They would likely consider Hong Kong protesters to be terrorists given this new law, people who could threaten the social order. China gets to make that distinction, and with all that power, they will abuse it. The wildest part about this law is that it supposedly applies to everyone, even people outside of China, even if you are not a resident. The Globe and Mail writes that they could arrest anyone, even international scholars who write favorable content about Hong Kong's independence. Even politicians who support putting sanctions on China are at risk. So let's say you are a Canadian politician and you say something like, China deserves to get sanctions for what they're doing to Hong Kong. And if you travel into Chinese territory or airspace, they can detain you and they can arrest you and you can go to jail for life according to their law. Now, of course, due to international agreements and just the independence of countries, that'll be a big problem. But China's trying to give themselves that power. And if you write as a scholar that China is doing X, Y, and Z, they have done X, Y, and Z in the past, and going forward it might happen again, you're going to get locked up. China isn't playing around anymore. If you want to criticize China, you just can't travel there because of the impending headache and the potential of being locked away forever. That's a great way to stifle free speech and free thinking. Now, they even go as far as to say that foreign companies like financial institutions like banks or whatnot who cooperate with American sanctions on Hong Kong's soil will be prosecuted for foreign collusion. So if you work for a bank and America is saying you have to do X, Y, and Z with the taxes or the tariffs or whatnot, and you do it because you're an American company and that's your mandate, China's going to come through and you're going to go to jail. That's a tricky situation to be in because on one hand, your home government's telling you to do something, but the government that you are residing in, because you're in office there, is going to lock you up for following the order. Of course, it probably means that foreign companies are not going to open up shop in Hong Kong anymore, just given this new escalating threat of potentially being caught up in a fraud or a collusion or whatever case that China wants to throw at them is just too much of a headache. China is essentially here tired of people criticizing their authoritarian, dystopian regime. Boo-hoo. Poor them. And now they're reacting with a sort of backlash. They're trying to shut down everything. They're saying that if you want to challenge the social order, whatever that means, you're going to go to jail. And it's written here that you will go to jail forever. That is pretty scary. The bottom line is that these laws are draconian and absurd. Nobody should be supporting them. China will abuse them to fit their agenda. That's a guarantee. They were created in an open-ended fashion on purpose. So the law here is that if you challenge the social order, if you bring about terrorism, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can go to jail for your life. But what is the social order? What does a violation in that mean? You aren't specific. And when the law is not specific, the viewer or the person in charge can mold it to fit whatever they want. They can bend the narrative to make it fit their desired application. In this case, it would be jailing dissidents, jailing people who do not agree with the authoritarian regime. Then China even tries to insult the Hong Kong populace. They say that this law will protect the life and property, basic rights and freedoms of the overwhelming majority of our citizens. Really now? Is that supposed to be a joke? Who do they think they're talking to? A bunch of fools? You say you want to protect basic rights by taking them away? I guess if you have no rights, there isn't anything to lose. China is an amazing place where they will strip you of the burden of having rights and they'll tell you that that is how they're going to protect your rights. It's insane. It's almost like doublethink here. This type of blatant lying and fabricating of the truth, it's scary. Especially when it's coming from such a powerful government. They are literally saying here that by removing your rights from the equation, they're going to make it a better place. They're going to protect everyone by having the authority to throw basically a random protester to jail for life because they've threatened whatever social order. They're threatening rights supposedly. By trying to get more rights, they're threatening the rights. The whole thing makes no sense. Some people may actually believe it too, and that's the scary part. It's a disaster. When China comes forward and gives such a corrupt statement like that, They've done such a good job indoctrinating much of the population that it will just come off as something inherently true. Whatever the government says is correct, especially when challenging what they say is going to result in you being thrown in jail. Especially now there's a law here that says you will go to jail for life. If you're really threatened, life imprisonment, for things that China deems a security risk, the bar is quite low. The citizens will rightfully be afraid to protest and fight for independence. You'll even be afraid to think something wrong because you might slip and say something that gets you in jail for life. You might have a family. You might have a wife or a child or loved ones who need you to be able to provide. Can you really risk going to jail forever? Then you can take it further. This isn't the end game yet. What if China starts to use the North Korean strategy of group guilt, where one member of your family commits a crime, even though the bar for a crime is just free thinking, and you can all face the consequences? That's what happens in North Korea. It's quite inhumane, but it's very effective because if you try to defect, if you try to rebel, not only are you risking your life, but your family will be killed as well. That's quite the motivation to toe the line. Now, this law has already been used as well to arrest people. It's not just for show. One young person with a sign saying Hong Kong independence is now in police custody. Authorities are also making it clear that chants of liberate Hong Kong constitute a crime because it undermines state power. I'm not joking with you. This is how crazy the world is right now, where simply chanting that you want the liberation of Hong Kong could get you thrown in jail forever. People read about these kind of realities in books like 1984 and Brave New World, but they seldom think it can happen in real life. Well, here's an example of a country that's doing it, and they are not even at their final form yet. Things can still get worse than they will unless we intervene. Now, look, I'm going to make this next point very clear. The Chinese Communist Party, the ruling government of China, is an evil entity. They are actively bringing about dystopia. If we cannot stop them, they will destroy freedom within their borders. Then, when given the chance, they will spread their ideology. This is the bringer of chaos. This is the bringer of a dystopian world that nobody should be forced to live in. To be threatened with life imprisonment because you are daring to protest the authoritarian policies of a government that you don't approve of, that should not get you in jail forever. You shouldn't have to fear that in 2020. That's not where we are as a civilization, but still, China is clinging to these archaic practices here. It's horrifying. The world has been far too timid as well in response to this. The answer is clear. All allied nations need to cut China off right now. They are rich and they are powerful, but they are exporters fundamentally. That's how they make their money. Stop buying from China. North America, Canada, the US, and Europe, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and any other group too who has an interest in this. We have to create a new Asian trade deal to force the outcome that we want to see. Our current arrangement with China is one that everyone should be worrying about. We continue to make them richer, and as they get richer, they get more powerful, and with more power comes greater injustices. China is ripe with that. If a country is willing to squash their own citizens like this, imagine how they would treat someone they deem a stranger. We need to cripple their economy and force them to play the game on our terms. If they refuse, enjoy sustaining an exporter economy that has no source of income because nobody's buying from you. This isn't a game anymore. Of course, that comes with cons to us because we're going to have to pay more money. China is able to offer goods at a ridiculously low price, but the moral implications of propping up China at this point are far too great. We have to make this agreement. It has to be talked about. We're looking at a regime, current day China, that is comparable to Nazi Germany in a couple ways. They have their own types of concentration camps, which I detailed way before the media did. They do not care for fundamental human rights. They are bullies on the world stage, not to mention they are arguably the top world power. And if not number one, they're number two. If things got hairy, we could seriously lose to a united force of China and Russia. Things could get way out of hand. I can't say it enough. Countries have to wake up and address these very real, looming issues. I get it. You can be bogged down in lesser things that seem to be magnified, because they're right in front of your face. But on the world stage, there's some crazy stuff going on right now. We have to be aware of that, and we have to do things to mitigate for it before it becomes too much of a problem to handle, frankly. And that could happen with powers as strong as Russia and China, especially if combined. And I said it last week, but I will reiterate the point because it's just so crazy to me. We have people right now actively calling to defund the military at a time like this. How oblivious to just geopolitical worldwide events do you have to be to think that's a great idea? To anyone who really thinks that we should be defunding the military, that is already quite defunded in Canada, I'm not too sure what to say to that. Now let's move on to another part of Asia that's going through a similar issue with a controversial law. The president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, put together an anti-terrorism bill that he says is meant to combat Islamic militancy in the South. The law allows for terrorism suspects to be detained without a warrant. It prolongs the amount of time they can be detained without being charged in court, and it removes a requirement that the police present suspects before a judge to assess whether they have been subjected to physical or mental torture. So basically, these are the changes in a nutshell. You can charge anyone with terrorism based on a suspicion, and you don't need proof. You don't even need a warrant. Then when they're detained, you can keep them there for a long time. No questions asked about it. Then, finally, you can torture them, and a judge won't be there to hold you accountable for doing so. They've been removed from the equation. Now, this here is a great example of the power of propaganda at work. The labeling of one thing and its actual aims can be quite different. You have to hold them in separate regards. You have to see the label, and you have to see the actual reality. People would instinctively be averse to terrorism. Everyone is. We don't like it. It's a bad thing. An anti-terrorism bill would suit that end, wouldn't it? It's against terrorists. We don't want terrorists, so therefore the bill must be good. Well, that's not it. But unfortunately, there is a dichotomy here now that has simply arisen because of the name of the bill, without considering the context there. Who could oppose a bill meant to get rid of terrorists? Are you a terrorist supporter? That's not true, and the problem is the bill will likely not fill that void if you look at the details of it. This is akin to Rodrigo's other notorious law. The president of the Philippines is ripe with these radical type of policies. He launched a war on drugs that came with a clause that you could just kill drug dealers in the streets if you wanted to. If you saw a drug dealer, you kill a drug dealer, no trial needed. That was his rule. People don't like drug dealers, but guess what? It wasn't just drug dealers who got killed. The president allegedly used that as a pretense to kill political rivals, people who didn't agree with him, people who he saw as a threat. Rodrigo would say, oh, he's a drug dealer. Someone kill him. And who knew if that was true or not? He's dead now, and there was no trial. There was no due process. This is the importance of innocence until proven guilty. These new terrorism laws are asinine, and they open the door to blatant corruption, as we've seen with the war on drugs over there. What's going to happen is like this. They're going to label somebody a terrorist. Then they're going to have the power to lock them up without a reason, and they can torture them too. That's an insane combination of paths there. It will be abused, like with China. People are right to worry about the power that can be used to silence the opposition, as he's done before. We can agree that we need to fight terrorism. That's fine. You can create laws about tackling the issue. But this here, what's been proposed, is not the way to do it. The contents of the law are backwards, and they bring you more problems than you had before. Of course, though, to the president, those aren't problems. They're actually benefits, is what he wanted. They are gifts to him. He would love to be able to lock away anyone he wishes, to be able to torture them without a judge being able to intervene. There are better ways to tackle terrorism, which, don't get me wrong, is a real problem. Stripping due process and inviting torture are no way to handle it, though. I'm going to make a prediction right now. There's going to be somebody who Duterte believes to be a threat to him in the upcoming political race, whenever that is. I'm not too sure of the actual cycle. But somebody will come up who will have different values than him, who will say something like, well, Duterte is a little bit crazy. He shouldn't be running the Philippines, and I'm going to be here to rectify the issue. Then Duterte If he takes him seriously, if he sees that the people are resonating with him, he's going to be labeled a terrorist. He's going to be labeled as somebody who is sabotaging the social fabric, somebody who is a threat to national security, and he's going to wound up dead because the president is the strongest person in that country, and he can do it to somebody who's just running to a candidate. And then what's going to happen? Well, there isn't a due process there. Even if it comes out that he was killed on purpose, the people who killed him can say he was a terrorist, and I'm sure that the president will back it up. And then, because he's dead, there's no trial. You may have tortured him prior, make him admit to something that wasn't true, because that's what torture can do to people. It's just not well thought out, and the people who are supporting it are buying into propaganda. And it's funny too, because propaganda, we seem to believe, is a tool of the past. We hear about it a lot during World War I, World War II, and we feel like we are immune to it. But every day, I see people falling victim to propaganda, where the branding of one thing is not the same as the action that's doing. And combating the action is not the same as combating the branding, because the branding could be valid. Anti-terrorism bill. Who would oppose that? Are you pro-terrorist? No, that's stupid, because we have to look at the actual contents here. There's nuance, but nowadays, nobody wants to hear that. They want the easy preview, the 140 character version that they feel fills the void, and that's enabling propaganda. Take everything you see with a grain of salt and dive into the details there. It's a shame that the world is the way it is right now, and we've come to a point where we have to hold the Filipino government accountable in the same ways we would with China. We need to rain down economic sanctions on them until bankruptcy changes their mind. These kinds of crackdowns on fundamental human rights are intolerable. Due process, free speech, the right to protest, to speak your mind, to have an opinion, contrary to the populace or what the government tells you. There is no room for these types of violations. Trudeau, Trump, Europe, Japan, Australia, and anyone else who needs to join, we have to get this done. I do really feel like a Asian trade deal is going to be the answer to this. We need an agreement that encourages proper behavior. In today's world, military action really is egregious. I don't think we can get away with it. And I don't even think it's called for per se. There'll be a lot of chaos that comes from that, a lot of dead people. And if we weigh the pros and the cons there, I'm not too sure it's a good idea, especially with China, where the end of the world is a distinct possibility. Nuclear fallout. With the Philippines, it's different, but even then, the casualties will be quite insane. There has to be another way of encouraging countries, I say encouraging in an interesting way there, to get with the times and to have a more progressive system. So with the Philippines and with China, I do think the economy is the way to go. To have the economy crumbling because of your illicit policies, you might think twice. You might think that, hey, the world is going to hold me accountable if I do something that's so outrageous that they can't stomach it. If I want my country to be successful, if I want to make money, if I don't want my people to be in open rebellion because they're not getting the basic necessities that they need due to sanctions and whatnot, well, I have to play ball. Otherwise, things will just get worse there. We have to sit down and re-envision what a trade deal of 2020 would look like. One that encourages proper behavior and rewards it, and one that punishes bad actors. As I said, things can get way worse than they are right now. We're just starting. It's the tip of the iceberg, but to ignore it now, when it can be mitigated, is a massive mistake. Already with Hong Kong, I believe things are getting rather out of reach. At the very beginning, I thought it would be a great idea to support them as much as we can, because that's the spark that could ignite China, that could wake the people up to the realities of their government. It's very different if Chinese people are telling other Chinese people about what a future could look like, versus a Westerner coming in and preaching the ideals there. They're going to trust the in-group more. But now, China realized that, and they're taking steps to squash it. And when it's squashed, I don't know if another possibility would emerge, especially because China's going to be ready for it now. Hong Kong, you could argue, maybe took China by surprise. I'm not sure if they were expecting it. China already had policies in place to scare people. You could go to jail, you could be threatened, things could happen to you for speaking up, but still, the citizens of Hong Kong stood up, together, as a unit. But now China is administering harsher consequences on Hong Kong for doing so. Now the bar is set at life in jail. And it can get worse from there. It could be a group guilt thing where your whole family goes to jail or people start dying. When the bar to entry gets that high, things are going to be harder to mount. People will have to get closer to a breaking point to actually do something. And we're letting the opportunities slip by us by not acting right now. We have to get these trade agreements and these sanctions in order on a united front. Things have to be done. That's the bottom line here. And letting them go on for too long is going to be disastrous because, as we're seeing here, the Philippines and China, and don't get me started on Russia, are encroaching on the rights of their citizens. And if they're going to do that to their own people, imagine what they would do to strangers if given the opportunity. And they will get the opportunity given their current trajectory. One day things will get so bad that we'll be forced to act, and I just hope that things won't be so out of control that we can't bring it back together. If China gets too powerful, if they start creating allies with the Philippines and Russia and places that have a similar type of ideology, they become stronger. They actually united in ways that we should have, when we could have. To delay this issue into the future makes no sense, and we do have to start talking about it. Only time will tell how we respond to these issues, though. Now, with that brings us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and share. They'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.